Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome tonight to the race review for yesterday's 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix from the streets of Baku yesterday, where we had an amazing result, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. A result that absolutely nobody would have predicted. Nobody. Maybe someone would have gone with Perez for victory if anything happened to Lewis and Hamilton and Max Verstappen. But in terms of the rest of the order, Vettel second, Gasly third, and just so much chaos, through the field in terms of overtaking and, that restart especially, for the final two laps of the Grand Prix. Just brilliant it was, those final stages of the Grand Prix. Wasn't a great race. It wasn't a classic. But it was definitely a race we're going to remember. And it could be a race that plays a big, not a big part, but a bit of a big part, say, in the World Championship and how it ends up at the end of the season. Again, it was Sergio Perez, as I just said. He ended up winning the Grand Prix. Fantastic result for him. And to get into the full results and the gaps between the cars, let's now get into those. Now, just want to say though, before I get into that, hopefully you guys after yesterday's race are doing well, and hopefully with me tonight you will join me in reviewing yesterday's Grand Prix. Oh, sorry, got a bit of a cough. Hopefully it's not you-know-what. But race result, here you go. Sergio Perez taking his first podium for Red Bull and first victory for Red Bull as well. Of course, his second win in Formula 1. And then second place, Sebastian Vettel. Third place, Why am I saying Kier? It's Pierre. Pierre Gasly in third place. And the rest of the order, Leclerc, Norris, Alonso, Tsunoda, Sainz, Ricciardo, and Raikkonen. And then the rest of the order that did not finish in the points, Giovinazzi, Bottas, Schumacher, Mazepin, Hamilton, and then Latifi, Russell, Verstappen, and then the retirements. I mean, Verstappen and Russell also retirements. But the ones earlier on, Stroll and Ocon. Let me just, though, quickly update the left-hand side because I forgot that Latifi had a penalty for staying out on track due to the, during the red flag when he was not supposed to. But that was the race result from yesterday's Grand Prix. And again, what a Grand Prix it turned out to be at the very end. Again, wasn't a great race, but we got a very, very exciting end and great result. But let's first, before we get into anything else, let's get into the fight for victory and the fight between the two championship protagonists, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, and how the battle between the two and how it all ended up for both ebbed and flowed, I guess you could say, during the race. So, of course, Charles Leclerc started on pole position, Hamilton second, Verstappen third. On the first lap, they got away in that order. And then, a couple laps into the Grand Prix, Hamilton, without even DRS, got into the slipstream with his low drag setup and easily overtook Charles Leclerc. Max Verstappen, the only way he could get past was by using DRS. Just shows you the extra straight line speed Mercedes had in the Grand Prix yesterday, that later on we'll see that they were getting close to, say, a certain Red Bull, but they weren't able to use it properly due to the pace they were losing in that middle sector. And then, after that, of course, and Verstappen, of course, like I said, passed Charles Leclerc. It was then, for the first stint up to the pit stop, Hamilton versus Verstappen. Sergio Perez had made his way past the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz and the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly with two just superb overtakes. One on the exit of turn 1 and around the outside of Gasly at turn 3. And then he also quickly disposed of Charles Leclerc for third place and was right in play, just with Hamilton and Verstappen, for the victory in Baku. And then when we got to the pit stops, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, in what has been a rare sight, I think we have to say, got it wrong. One, in terms of when they pitted, and secondly, with the pit stop itself. I mean, of course, Valtteri Bottas had a very, very bad pit stop, of course, in Monaco, but that was a very rare issue that occurred there. But it's very rare that Mercedes, are struggling on their pit stops consistently now, which we've seen again in the last couple races. And yeah, just with that pit stop, firstly, I think Nibs said it at the time in the watch-along, I think Mercedes might have been anticipating a virtual safety car because Carlos Sainz was down the escape road at, I think, turn 8 or turn 9, the castle section, that escape road down there, as we'll get into later on how Carlos Sainz's race unfolded. Maybe, yeah, they did anticipate a virtual safety car and tried to get Hamilton in for a fresh set of tyres. But ultimately, pitting early was not the right decision, as we saw, for example, with with Sebastian Vettel and even Lance Stroll and the two Aston Martins, who, despite being on the tyres they started on, especially Sebastian Vettel on the soft compound tyre, the same tyre that Hamilton started on, the pace of the cars on that tyre when they went longer was not bad at all, if not pretty good. So I do think Hamilton was pitted too early by Mercedes. He pitted on lap 10, I think, or lap 11. Again, I think it was too early. They probably should have waited 2 to 3 more laps, to be honest. I mean, Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team with Sergio Perez as well, I don't think they were really ever intending to pit a lap after Hamilton. The only reason they did with Verstappen is because Lewis Hamilton had a poor pit stop and they had to capitalise on that. I think Red Bull, if Hamilton had gone, say, to lap 15, I think Red Bull would have done the exact same. So I do think Mercedes jumped the gun too early on the pit stop there, and it did cost them. And again, they had about 2.5 seconds slower pit stop than they needed. Did get held up by Pierre Gasly, I think, briefly in the pits there. And it did cost Lewis Hamilton massively in the Grand Prix, because not only did he lose position to Max Verstappen once Max Verstappen pitted a lap later, with what I have to say was a great pit stop by Red Bull, 1.9 seconds, doing literally the best pit stop they could do to get Verstappen into the lead. They then also got this man, Sergio Perez, ahead of Lewis Hamilton. His pit stop wasn't great, but I think the pace of Sergio Perez, a couple laps after Hamilton pitted, those two, I guess, in-laps, you would call them, because he was pushing very hard to try and jump Hamilton in that pit stop phase. Sergio Perez's laps were so great. If you go back and look, he was actually, I think, lapping a lot quicker than Max Verstappen on Max Verstappen's first lap out of the pits. So, Perez, again, very, very quick and got out ahead of Lewis Hamilton just about. And Perez, I have to say, did a phenomenal job in holding off Lewis Hamilton for as long as he did. Of course, later on, there was a bit of a scare, I guess you would say, for Red Bull on the safety car, or not the safety car, but the standing restart of the Grand Prix for Red Bull and Perez. But up until then, I thought Perez did well, very, very well, to not only just stay clearly ahead of Lewis Hamilton and not really falter or crack under the pressure, I guess you would say, but his pace compared to Max Verstappen even was pretty good. He was staying within 3.5 to 4 seconds of Verstappen, really, for the whole Grand Prix. So Sergio's pace was great. If only he had started, I mean, of course he did win the race, but if only he had started the race in a higher position, he probably could have been in the lead of the Grand Prix before Verstappen, had his issue, which we'll get into in a moment. So Perez, again, his pace in the Grand Prix was great. And talking to Max Verstappen, of course, he was in the lead, looking great, looked as though he was going to win the Grand Prix and extend his championship lead to probably 15 points, which would be a decent gap to have to Lewis Hamilton going into the French Grand Prix. And then this, a shocking moment. Nobody expected this to happen with just 3 laps to go in the Grand Prix. A tyre failure at the highest speed part of the circuit. And a very scary moment, I'm sure, for Max Verstappen. Now, Pirelli have said that this puncture, and also Stroll's puncture, was caused, they believe, due to an early investigation to debris. But they did point out that they do want to conclude a full investigation, and they will report back to the teams before the French Grand Prix with their findings, and if there's any recommendations that need to be made in terms of tyre pressures, or whether they're going to do anything different with the tyres. They will report to the teams back with any more evidence, key evidence, and I guess you'd say advice before the French Grand Prix. But they believe it's due to debris. I can't really sit here and say they're wrong, because they know more than me, especially about their tyres. And also, because it's a street circuit and debris at street circuits is very common, even though I didn't see any debris on track that Verstappen or Stroll could have run over to cause their punctures, it wouldn't surprise me if they did have debris that caused those failures. Lewis Hamilton also did have a cut on his tyres right before that happened, or when they came into the pits for the red flag, he also had a cut on his tyres. So it's kind of a 50-50 at the minute whether it was a tyre failure due to tyre wear or debris. I don't want to speculate though, because again, they know more than me, and even though I didn't see any of the 2 drivers, Verstappen or Stroll, run over debris, and there was no replays of it, which I'm sure we would have seen if there was clear evidence that they did on circuit. Again, even though I didn't see them run over debris, I don't want to sit here and say, well, it was definitely due to tyre wear then, because, again, Pirelli know more about the situation than I do, and of course know more about their tyres than I do. So we'll wait and see what their full investigation concludes. Of course, Pirelli at last year's British Grand Prix had some tyre failures, which were down to tyre wear. That wasn't down to debris at all. But with Silverstone, the reason it was definitely tyre wear is because, Silverstone is a purpose-built racetrack, so it's a lot harder for debris to find its way onto the circuit. Also, there's lots of high-speed corners at Silverstone, which of course puts a tremendous load through the tyre, which of course is going to put a lot of stress through the tyre. And the drivers who, Sainz, Bottas and Hamilton, who had those punctures, have been on those tyres for a very long time, and probably quite a bit longer than they should have. So it is quite a different situation from this in Baku. But of course, what a bad moment it was for Max Verstappen. And even though Lewis Hamilton, as we'll get into in a moment, had his issue, even if, even with that issue that Hamilton had, which I'm sure Max Verstappen was very pleased to see, Verstappen still, of course, would have preferred to win the Grand Prix, even if Hamilton finished in third, because he would have extended his championship lead. Because, of course, at the moment, it is still just 4 points. So it's not the end of the world, considering that Hamilton did not capitalise on Verstappen's problem. But it definitely could have been a whole lot better for Max Verstappen. But at least with Red Bull, for the first time in a while, having a second car up there to help, they still had a good day with Sergio Perez. But before that good day could be confirmed for Perez, there was the tricky negotiation of the restart of the Grand Prix. Now, as you can see here, just off the marks as the race got going again, soon as the lights went out on that restart, that standing restart, you'll see if you watch the replay, Lewis Hamilton got a much better start than Sergio Perez. Much better start. Perez tried to move over and force Hamilton to, I guess, make a mistake going into the braking zone, which did work. Lewis Hamilton did actually have a brake setting on that did cause his lockup. I mean, it's still his mistake, and he has, of course, admitted to that mistake, which, of course, all great champions do. But I do think, and Nib said this, I think, after the stream yesterday, that Perez moving over on Hamilton did actually help Hamilton lock up, which, of course, is, all fair from Perez. He has to try his best to force Hamilton into a mistake when Hamilton was clearly ahead. But again, as you can see here, Hamilton already progressing alongside Perez. At this point, before you get to, this white line, as you can see, he is clearly ahead. But as we move it on slightly, by this point, where, to be honest, you go back to the previous picture, he probably should have been braking just after this white line. But as you can see, in terms of his progression compared to the barrier on the left-hand side and the colours, he doesn't start braking until almost the final, that blue colour there. He just simply braked way too late for the corner. Of course, that's what he did. But it's not just, I think, because of that setting, that brake magic setting he had on, as to why he had the lockup. Of course, it wouldn't have helped, but he just braked way, way, way too late. And I think because Perez moved over and made him kind of go more onto the dirtier side of the track, and because Hamilton was probably concentrating more so on making sure he was ahead of Perez, I think simply he just misjudged the braking zone and almost, I guess you could say, forgot exactly where he needed to brake going into turn one. And of course, made the mistake and spectacularly went down the escape road and went from first all the way down to the back. Of course, finished 15th because of Nicholas Latifi's penalty. But that, I don't think, will be the moment that decides the championship, because we have so many races to go. I don't think it will be decided purely on that moment. But that is now, in the races, of course, where the points are really scored. That is the second big mistake that Hamilton has made in the first 6 races. Verstappen has only made one, I won't say big mistake, but definitely a mistake that cost him in Portugal, where he lost the rear end on the exit of the final real corner that allowed Hamilton to then find his way past. Except for that, Max Verstappen has been absolutely flawless in the races, which he normally is. He's always better in the races, Verstappen, than he is in qualifying, and Hamilton tends to be kind of equal, 90% of the time in qualifying and the race. When, back in the day, Hamilton used to be a lot better in qualifying than he was in the Grand Prix itself. But if you look at this season, again, Verstappen, except for that mistake in Portugal in the race, has been flawless. Hamilton, I think, has been great this season in the races, but except for those 2 mistakes, except for those 2 mistakes, he would be leading, the championship if those mistakes did not happen. But it's rare to see. Hamilton, of course, he's going to make a mistake eventually. He is human. But it's very rare to see him make 2 big ones that have had a big implication on the championship standings so far in just 6 races, the first 6 races of 2021. Imola, he didn't really lose out because of the red flag, and he got lucky there. If the red flag didn't happen, Hamilton probably would have finished 8th at best, and would be, he's 4 points behind now, so he probably would have been, let's say if he did get the fastest lap, he did in Imola, probably would have been 24 points behind at the moment if he did not get really out of jail with that red flag that happened just after he made his pit stop after going a lap down. So, got lucky there. Didn't cost him, really. But here, of course, cost him the race win. And if he had won the Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton, he would have gone into the lead of the championship by, I think, 21 points or 20 points, something like that. Again, that is, again, a big mistake. And be interesting just to see, between now and the summer break, whether Lewis Hamilton commits any more, because it's very rare to see Hamilton do this. If this was, no disrespect, a Sebastian Vettel, who, of course, 2 or 3 years ago, when he was fighting for the championship, made plenty of mistakes under pressure, it wouldn't be that big of a surprise. Again, no disrespect, but for Lewis Hamilton, who has been so ice cool under pressure, it's a massive shock that this happens. Massive, massive shock. And we'll see how he bounces back. I mean, he will. It's Lewis Hamilton. If he doesn't bounce back, then there are real serious issues coming forward for Hamilton and Mercedes in the World Championship. But be interesting to see how he bounces back, especially now that this is the first time, probably since 2018, that he's been seriously under pressure to win a World Championship. So we'll see how he responds to it. I think, honestly, the Max Verstappen Red Bull, like I've said before, the package compared to the Vettel Ferrari one of 3 or 4 years ago, I think the Verstappen and Red Bull one is a lot stronger and harder to beat. But of course, Hamilton can still beat it, and Mercedes, of course, can. I do think in France, Mercedes and Hamilton will be the favourites, because in the last 2 races in France, Hamilton has been just superb, and so have the Mercedes team. But if he doesn't win in France and has another race that's not quite, or race result rather, that's not quite good enough, going into the Red Bull ring where Verstappen has got to be the favourite, and so Red Bull, got to say then the momentum is going to be so much with Red Bull and Verstappen, and it's going to take a lot for Hamilton to reverse it if he does not get the result he needs in France. And I think also it would be big if he won the French Grand Prix, because if he does, he will take the lead of the championship again, even though it will only be by, at least 2 points if Verstappen finishes second and gets the fastest lap. But it would be something if he could get back into the lead of the championship, even if it is brief, before, again, those races in Austria. Of course, Red Bull's home Grand Prix, and where Red Bull should be very strong. And Max Verstappen is probably the best driver around the Red Bull ring. So, got to win. Absolutely got to win as Hamilton in France. And Mercedes have got to score some big points as well, because they're now 30-odd points behind Red Bull in the Constructors. And they've only scored Mercedes 7 points in the last 2 races. 7. And Red Bull scored 63. So they've got to get, at least 20, 25 points in the next Grand Prix, because they don't want to, let Red Bull just run away with it in the Constructors' Championship and give away so many points, which they have been doing at the moment in the championship in the last couple of races. But yeah, Hamilton, be interesting to see how he bounces back at Paul Ricard, where honestly he should bounce back with a victory. For Sergio Perez, great to see him win the Grand Prix, of course. He didn't deserve to win the Grand Prix. I do think Max Verstappen deserved it. He was definitely the best driver in the Grand Prix, but Sergio Perez was great as well. The way he got past Sainz and Gasly and then put in the laps to perform the overcut on Lewis Hamilton and then hold him off for so long. Perez did also drive very, very well. And again, very happy for the guy. And now Perez, 3rd in the championship, and he's not far off the lead as well. He's only, I think, 35, 36 points off. I mean, of course, he's not going to win it, but if he could get in there, then you never know. Might even prove me wrong on that. But yeah, good. Very good Grand Prix for Perez. And all Perez has got to do, I think, for the rest of the season, because if you look at his race performances so far this season, except for Imola, Perez in the race, his pace has been very strong compared to his teammate, Max Verstappen. So as long as he gets good grid positions, and when I mean good grid positions, I mean he needs to be qualifying consistently in the top 5 of every Grand Prix. France will be hard because Perez is not, if you look at the last 2 races at Paul Ricard, he's not great around that track. And I do expect Ferrari to be quick because Leclerc and Sainz have been pretty good there in the last couple of races there. And they are driving both very well, especially in qualifying. I think it will be tough for Perez, but if he can get into a rhythm and, again, consistently qualify in the top 5 of races, he should be able to finish 3rd in the championship because his race pace is easily better than Valtteri Bottas. And his race pace is easily good enough, even at times, to be fighting, say, with Lewis Hamilton, if Hamilton is having a bit of a tough time. So, just got to get that qualifying sorted out. And I think Perez could be a consistent podium scorer this season in the Red Bull, and really should be, considering the troubles of Valtteri Bottas. But yeah, great to see Perez win the Grand Prix. Of course, you guys know I love Sergio Perez, and I'm really happy for him. I was so happy that he got the chance at Red Bull, finally getting the chance he deserved after the great career he has had in midfield machinery. And now he's in a top car. I think in the races, at least, he has shown clearly why he deserves to be in the Red Bull. Great performances, and hopefully will build on this. And for Valtteri Bottas, finally, what a shit race. 12th place, and he was lucky to get that because he was down at one point in 14th place, I think. I don't even know what there is to say. I mean, of course, qualifying was poor. I think he did run a higher drag setup, and maybe if Hamilton had been running that setup, maybe Hamilton would have had a poor race in Baku, and maybe Mercedes got it wrong in terms of Bottas' setup, and maybe they should have done it with him as well. I think that's how much Mercedes honestly were struggling in practice, to the point where they had to do something massively different with Hamilton's car. But yeah, with Bottas, his performance was just terrible. I mean, you would expect him, even though his setup probably wasn't quite right, you'd still expect him to score points, especially considering his teammate, had his problem at the end. Verstappen retired. And, Stroll and Ocon as well. You'd expect him still to finish in the points, even if it wasn't a great points finish. Again, very, very poor. And if any more performances like that occur, I don't see how he keeps his seat for 2022. I mean, of course, I've defended him a lot. I do actually think in 2019 and 2020, most of the time, he was actually doing pretty well. Because most of the time, he was, in terms of pure lap time, not that far off Lewis Hamilton. And at times was actually quicker than him at certain circuits where it's very impressive to out-qualify a driver of Hamilton's quality, such as, last year he out-qualified him at Silverstone, Nürburgring, Imola. Again, historic, great tracks where the drivers make a massive difference. So I was very impressed by Bottas at times last year. This year, I just can't think of a Grand Prix where I thought, maybe Monaco, saying qualifying, you could put that down as one, but I just haven't really thought of any real moment this season where I thought, yeah, Bottas has put in a real good performance here. It just hasn't really happened. And if that is what's going to happen this season with him, then he's got to go at the end of the season. Got to say, though, if he does go at the end of the season, I think people should put respect on his name because he has had a pretty good career at Mercedes. And I think in a few years' time, especially when Lewis Hamilton retires with all of his world championships, probably even more, might even win 10 yet, we'll have to see. I think Bottas will be looked upon as actually a pretty good driver on reflection because I mean, look at the way Rubens Barrichello, for example, was viewed. Barrichello was miles off Michael Schumacher 90% of the time. But everyone looks back on him fondly. And, Bottas has been very similar to Barrichello in terms of his performance compared to Hamilton's. And I know people expect Bottas to beat Hamilton only because of what happened in 2016 where Rosberg beat Hamilton in the championship, completely forgetting that one, Rosberg is a better driver than Bottas, and secondly, the reasons why Rosberg won the championship, which was because when Hamilton had an issue, Rosberg capitalized fully on those problems for Lewis Hamilton, mostly reliability issues. He wasn't actually quicker than Hamilton in 2016, and I don't think he won even as many races as Hamilton that season. But again, just brilliantly executed when Hamilton wasn't in play for whatever reason. So I think, again, poor performance. It's getting a bit too much now, say, this season for Bottas, those performances. But again, when we reflect on Valtteri Bottas' Mercedes career, I mean, I will probably make a video on it at some point. But again, I think people need to put some respect on his name, because he's going up against, as a teammate, the greatest driver of all time. Anyone next to Lewis Hamilton in the same team is not going to look very special at all, or that great. So, again, I think Bottas needs to be respected. And I think if you put Bottas in a midfield car, I think he'd surprise people as to how quick he really is. Because remember, at Williams, he put in plenty of very, very good, if not great, performances, and had a pretty good teammate in Felipe Massa. I mean, yeah, Massa wasn't at his best anymore, but I think Bottas, considering the car he was in, did pretty great at Williams in 2014, 15, 16. So again, it looks as though it's coming to the end for Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes, but let's not forget, he's had a pretty good career at Mercedes, and he will be remembered, I think, very fondly by the team. And I think, again, in years to come, I think people will actually respect Bottas, considering how great his teammate has gone on to be. But that is my review of the top two teams and how they performed against each other. And definitely Red Bull coming out on top. The second race in a row that they have beaten, clearly, the Mercedes team. Mercedes are under massive pressure now going into the French Grand Prix. And as I said, in France, because of Hamilton and Mercedes' record in the last couple of races there, I do think Hamilton is the favourite to win in Paul Ricard, and I do think he will win in Paul Ricard. But if he doesn't, and if he doesn't finish in second, and Verstappen wins, then again, pressure really will be at its highest level for Mercedes, probably since Ferrari were in the lead of the championship midway through 2018. And I think it's a lot less likely that Verstappen is going to bottle it than Vettel did in 2018. But guys, let me know in the live chat right now and the comments section, what did you think of all of what happened for Verstappen, Perez, Hamilton and Bottas in their respective Grand Prix, and for Mercedes and Red Bull? How do you think the championship battle is looking now, and how do you think things will go, from here going into the French Grand Prix? Let me know again in the chat and comment section. And as well, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, because we will be, of course, doing a race review for every Grand Prix remaining in 2021. Also, if you did catch the race watch along or even qualifying watch along from Azerbaijan earlier in the weekend, I will be doing that for the remainder of 2021 as well, for, again, all the remaining races. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications bell for those streams coming up later this season. And of course, starting in 2 weeks will be a triple header, the first triple header of the season. There's another triple header, of course, right after the summer break, and maybe there'll be another one in October as well, hopefully. So again, don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or go to my channel page and do it there. And as well, whilst you're there, hit the notifications bell. And as well, don't forget to share this video and channel everywhere you can, and smash the like button. But let's now find some comments in relation to the events of the Grand Prix for Mercedes and Red Bull. Conker saying Perez is finally coming to terms with the car. Well, I think he said in a quote, maybe at the start of the season, give me 5 races or so to get with the car and understand it. And I think he said, actually, after practice on Friday, that he now finally understands the Red Bull. And if you look at his pace of the race, I mean, if he understands it that well, he's going to be definitely someone to look out for a lot in the remaining races, because he could end up with more than just that one victory. Could end up with a couple. And I will say as well, I really hope the Mexican Grand Prix stays on the calendar, because can you imagine if Perez, I mean, on the podium in Mexico would be great, but what if he actually won the Mexican Grand Prix in the Red Bull? And the Red Bull team, of course, very popular in Mexico, and Red Bull very successful as well. So, yeah, that would be a tremendous sight to see. But I think definitely Sergio Perez, he's going to get plenty more podiums this season. Don't think it'll be in France, because, again, his record in France is not great. But I wouldn't be surprised if he got one in Austria. And then, I mean, probably the Italian Grand Prix coming up later in the season. I think he'll probably get one there, because he's pretty good at Monza. Also Spa as well. So I think Perez is going to be someone who's going to be a bit of a force for the rest of the drivers behind, of course, Hamilton and Verstappen. JB says Bottas has possibly the best driver of all time as his teammate. Can't be easy at all. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point I'm making. Anyone next to Lewis Hamilton, well, not anyone, but 90% of drivers of all time are going to look pretty average compared to Lewis Hamilton, because he is, for me, the greatest of all time. So I think people need to remember that and kind of adjust expectations. I've been saying this for like 3 years, though, with Bottas, when it comes to the expectations for him that we need to have. Been saying this since I started this channel in 2018. People need to stop expecting him to do a Rosberg. He's not going to do a Rosberg. What Rosberg did, of course, was great. And, congratulations to the guy for winning a world championship. But it's not going to happen again. What happened for Rosberg, where he didn't even get more race wins than Hamilton. And that's the first time it's ever happened, I think, where... or not ever happened, but the first time for a long time where a driver with, say, not the most race wins in a season has won the championship. It's very rare that happening, honestly. And again, I think expecting Valtteri Bottas to do a Rosberg was never really possible. Of course, we hoped he could, but he was never going to. Valtteri Bottas, and I said this again about 3 years ago when I started this channel, Valtteri Bottas is today's version of Rubens Barrichello, and Lewis Hamilton, of course, is today's version of Michael Schumacher, but just that slight bit better. So, again, look at what Barrichello did to Michael compared to Michael Schumacher. There were races where Barrichello beat Michael Schumacher, but it was rare. 90% of the time, Michael was clearly ahead and Barrichello nowhere near close to Michael in Grand Prix. So, again, I don't understand why, and maybe it's people who don't like Lewis Hamilton or hate Lewis Hamilton. Maybe they're just desperate to see Valtteri Bottas stop Hamilton being successful. I don't get it. Again, I do not get it. What he's done compared to Hamilton and what he's done in that team, very, very well. He's done very, very well. Can't really complain. If Bottas' teammates at Mercedes, say for the last 4 years, was Daniel Ricciardo, and he was consistently as far off to Ricciardo as he has been to Hamilton, but fair enough. Because, I mean, Ricciardo is very good, but Ricciardo is nowhere near the level of Lewis Hamilton. No disrespect to Ricciardo, of course. But, again, compared to Lewis Hamilton, who is so phenomenally great and is still at the absolute peak of his powers, I just don't understand what people expect Valtteri Bottas to do. Of course, yesterday in the Grand Prix, he should have finished the points, and I completely agree he was poor. But if you look at his Mercedes career in general, I just don't understand what people think Bottas should have done. He's basically replicated even the championship results that Barrichello had from Barrichello's time at Ferrari, where Barrichello, I think, he finished 4th in his first season, did Barrichello, and then I think 4th again, or 3rd in 2001, then 2nd in 02, 5th in 03, I think, and then 2nd in 04, and then in 2005 he was quite low down, mainly because the Ferrari car was really poor. I mean, Bottas, in comparison, has actually done just as well, if not better. So, again, I think people need to have some respect for Valtteri, because I think he's had a pretty good career, and I think there's plenty of people who would have loved to have a career like Valtteri Bottas. One, of course, being, you know, say a driver like Nico Hülkenberg. And if I was to choose a career over, you know, between the two, I'd definitely choose Valtteri Bottas's over Nico Hülkenberg's. So, right, let's read out some final comments, and then we'll get on to the rest of the teams. Of course, I've still got to get into plenty of teams here in this review. JB also says Rosberg threw everything mentally into 2016. Bottas would be drained if he tried to repeat that success. Simon Craglan says the development race will be interesting. To be honest, I think it will just remain the same, really, the gaps between the two top teams throughout the season, because they are going to start concentrating and pushing to the max, no pun intended, with the development for next year's cars, because of course next year is so important for the team's futures in terms of where they will lie compared to other teams in the pecking order. So yeah, I think in comparison, Red Bull, Mercedes, I think the gaps will remain the same. It's still very close. It will be all season. It'll ebb and flow all season, and I do think at this current rate that it will go down to the final couple races in 2021. I still think Lewis Hamilton will win, because I still think Hamilton has enough to just about get it done. But Verstappen is going to push him probably the hardest since, say, Nico Rosberg. Of course, in 2016, where Rosberg won it, but also 2014 as well, where Rosberg pushed Hamilton to the very end. Anyway, I think we'll get into the rest of the teams now. So, first off, Ferrari. Compared to their grid position, disappointing. 4th and 8th for them. Only, 16 points? Again, disappointing, I think, for them. I think they really, considering as well that Hamilton and Verstappen, you know, basically fell out of the race. I think Ferrari, if you'd told them that before the race, they would have been expecting at least a podium. Say 2nd place from the Grand Prix of Charles Leclerc. So for them to only come away with 4th and 8th, considering that Hamilton and Verstappen, again, basically fell out of the Grand Prix, is quite disappointing. And even though they have claimed 3rd in the Constructors, again, there is a lot of points that they missed out on. Carlos Sainz, of course, with that mistake in the Grand Prix, we'll get into that in a moment, he lost out on probably an extra, say, 6 points, I'd say, in the Grand Prix. And then Leclerc, probably an extra 6 points as well. So, again, 12 points. That could have been a massive 12 points for the team, but it just wasn't to be. Still a decent result, but again, nowhere near as good as it really could have been, considering what happened to Hamilton and Verstappen. I've got to say, I was very surprised how easily Leclerc was getting past at the start. I don't know if maybe the tyres were going off too much. I don't know for sure, but his, you know, the amount of time he was giving up in the early part of the straight to Hamilton and Verstappen and Perez, again, I was very surprised they were able to just completely swat him aside, really, with DRS. I mean, I know the DRS is quite powerful, but again, Leclerc was easily overtaken by the Red Bulls and Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton. And then even, you know, him being jumped by Pierre Gasly, who, I mean, Gasly was great in the race, but I was very surprised that Gasly did get ahead. Great lap, or couple laps that Gasly had to put in to get ahead of Charles Leclerc. But again, very surprised that Gasly was able to do that. I'm surprised Leclerc just did not have the speed, because even though he didn't have quite the speed most likely for pole, even though he did get it, it was a big surprise that he did get it. I thought he would have been quick enough still to hold off the AlphaTauri of Gasly, but again, simply just wasn't. And then ended up, behind behind Gasly, sorry, for the rest of the Grand Prix. And then, of course, on the safety car restart, Sebastian Vettel, who had a great overcut that he performed on, I think, Yuki Tsunoda, and was able to close the gap massively to Gasly and Leclerc with much fresher tyres when he came out of his first and only pit stop. Again, on the safety car restart, Vettel able to just easily overtake Charles Leclerc and brilliantly pass Pierre Gasly as well. And like I said, just didn't quite go to plan for Ferrari and just didn't quite execute, I think, the best performance they could have in the Grand Prix. But I do believe the next race in France, I think Charles Leclerc definitely will still be in the top 3 or 4 on the grid and be very competitive in the Ferrari, which is improving all the time. Of Carlos Sainz, I think, considering his mistake at the castle section where he went down the escape road, I think he'll be happy, again, considering that mistake, that he still finished in 8th place and got 4 points. But it could have been, again, so much more. Probably could have got a top 5 finish in the Grand Prix, but it just was not to be. Good recovery. He looked quick in the race. He did look quick, but again, that mistake just costing him so much in comparison to everybody else. But at least for Ferrari, they have claimed now 3rd in the Constructors. They are still only 2 points ahead, so still need to keep on it if they're going to beat McLaren, who are still going to be pretty quick for the rest of the season, of course, with Lando Norris heading the McLaren charge. But yeah, in France, I think Ferrari should be 3rd best team yet again, like they have been for the last 3 or 4 races. And I will say, I think Ferrari have now just about edged themselves into that top team bracket. They're definitely not as good as Mercedes and Red Bull. They're not as quick overall and consistently, but they are able still on pace to at least compete with them, especially in qualifying. If they can improve the car, especially with the power unit, just a bit more, especially considering they have a bit more development in the wind tunnel allowed compared to Mercedes and Red Bull, because Ferrari finished lower down in the Constructors last season. And of course, with the new rules, the lower down in the Constructors you finish, the more time you get to develop for this year. If they can use that well, then I still think Ferrari can have some good success this season. Will they get a race win? We'll have to see. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take a great performance and also a bit of luck, I think, for Ferrari to get it. But again, they're definitely back a part of that top team bracket. But still, right there with them in the Constructors' Championship and on pure results is McLaren. And I think McLaren, yet again, they've done this so many times in the last couple of years, but yet again, they were able to get quite a bit more points out of this race than really was there for them. It looked as though it was going to be probably 6 or 7 points coming away from this race, say after the first 10, 15 laps, and they've ended up coming away with 12. So, again, pretty good points haul considering their pace compared to, say, AlphaTauri, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren. Again, not really that quick compared to them. And I do think McLaren, from now on, are just simply not going to be as quick as Ferrari for the rest of the season. And Ferrari are definitely the clear favourites to now finish 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. But I think because of McLaren's race performances, they are still in that fight. But for Lando Norris, again, great driving. Of course, with that grid penalty, had work to do. Very good overtakes, very good speed, and as well, great manoeuvring on that restart of the race at the very end to get 5th place. Could have been even better, probably. If there was more laps, probably could have finished in 3rd place and got another podium, which would have been an amazing result for Lando Norris, who just, at the end of races, is so, so strong, as we've seen. in the last year or so. And Daniel Ricciardo finishing ninth. Gotta say, with Ricciardo, that very lucky to finish the race, because Antonio Giovinazzi on the restart of the race on lap 50 gave a very hefty hit to his rear end. And I'm surprised Ricciardo didn't have really any major damage that ended up, forcing a retirement, because Ricciardo, again, if you go back and watch the replay and you see the onboards that will be published on the F1 channel probably tomorrow or Wednesday, again, pretty lucky to finish the Grand Prix with that contact from Giovinazzi. So good that Ricciardo still scored a couple points. I think, honestly, considering Ricciardo's troubles in qualifying and considering his troubles in the last few weeks, I think Ricciardo should be happy with that result, because McLaren, even with Norris, were the 5th best team, really, in Baku. They weren't as quick as Ferrari and AlphaTauri, and of course, they weren't as quick as Mercedes and Red Bull. So, I mean, Ricciardo didn't do that bad, really. I think he should be pretty happy with that performance. I will say, though, in France, I think Ricciardo will struggle, because last couple times we've raced there, Ricciardo has not really been doing anything of note, and it's not really shone in the 2018 or 2019 French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard. So, again, I think he will struggle, especially compared to Norris, who, the last time we raced in Paul Ricard, Norris especially, was so great, especially in qualifying, where he almost qualified 3rd then. And McLaren were nowhere near the top 3 teams on the grid. So I imagine what Norris might do in 2 weeks. We'll have to look out and see what he does. But yeah, Ricciardo, I think, will struggle. But look out for Lando Norris, because he might pull off, yet again, another phenomenal qualifying attempt. And now let's get into the rest. Aston Martin, what a day for Sebastian Vettel. 2nd place, his first podium for Aston Martin. His 2nd podium only in the last year and a half, which is something I never thought I'd be saying with Sebastian Vettel. Only 2 podiums in a year and a half. I've got to say that. I mean, of course, he clearly won Driver of the Day. He was Driver of the Day. What I can't believe, though, is just how good he was in that race. I mean, in qualifying, we knew he probably could have gone quicker and probably could have qualified in 8th or 9th place and had a decent grid position, which probably would have helped his result maybe that slight bit more to be even closer to Perez at the end. We'll have to see. Or not we'll have to see, but, who knows if we would have seen that. But in the race, he was literally perfect in what he needed to do. Had a good start, gained a couple positions, got past, I think, Bottas and Norris. Then he, after Alonso pitted very early and was behind Tsunoda, once they pitted and Vettel was leading the race actually for a few laps, he stayed out there, did some brilliant laps, staying out to, of course, jump them in the pit stop phase. Then when he pitted, came out ahead of them. Again, great overcut by the Aston Martin team and Sebastian Vettel. And then was only, 1 and a bit seconds behind Gasly and Leclerc. Then we had the safety car, of course, caused by Lance Stroll, which we'll get into in a moment. On the safety car restart, passes Leclerc and Gasly. Again, great overtakes and gets up to what was 4th place at the time. Then Verstappen, of course, retires. Then on the restart of the race, Hamilton has his issue and then comes home to finish in 2nd. If he was close enough to Perez on the run down the pit straight to start the final lap, you never know. Sebastian Vettel could have actually won. And also, just to let you guys know, I forgot to mention this, Sergio Perez, the reason he stopped at the very end, just after the checkered flag, was because he had a hydraulic issue. Just imagine if Sergio Perez had a hydraulic issue on that run to the line, the final few meters, and Vettel had beat him to the line. I think me and Nib probably would have screamed into a different dimension if that happened. So very nearly could have won the race. If it was just 1 lap longer, Sebastian Vettel would have actually won the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku. So, phenomenal performance. So happy for him. So happy as well for Aston Martin. Got to say, I've noticed it all season. And of course, we've seen this in the last few years anyway, when they were racing Point and Force India. But the race pace of Aston Martin is so strong. their qualifying speed is not too bad. It's not great. It's nothing to brag about, but it's not too bad. But their race pace is right up there. It's as good as McLaren and, you know, Ferrari and AlphaTauri. It really is. Lance Stroll, even before his puncture, was going quicker than all the drivers behind him, such as Gasly, Leclerc, even his teammate Vettel, Tsunoda, Sainz, the two McLarens. I mean, he was so quick, Stroll, on that harder compound tyre, or the hard compound tyre, rather, that he started the race on and did 30 laps on. Again, the race pace of Aston Martin is so good. And going into the French Grand Prix, where tyre wear is very important, and Aston Martin do seem to really look after their tyres very well, which I think is a big reason why their lap times are so consistently good, even when they go a bit longer into races than other, say, teams do. Because of that, and because of their race pace in general, I think France might be, another great result for them. I'm not going to say they're going to finish on the podium again. I mean, that would be spectacular, but with the way Sebastian Vettel is driving, and with Lance Stroll, you know, hopefully he can get a bit higher of a grid position than what he's had in the last couple races. Very hard to say Aston Martin are not going to be a consistent point scorer going forward for the rest of the season. And if they can keep improving that car, no reason why Aston Martin can't be regularly competing with the front midfield teams, such as, AlphaTauri and McLaren. I mean, Ferrari, the reason I say Ferrari are just about on that top bracket with the other two top teams is because of what they can do in qualifying. And that does help a lot, of course. If you have grid position in Formula 1, it helps massively. But their race pace is even just as good as them. So I think definitely look out for Aston Martin for the rest of the season. A bit of a dark horse, I think, for some good results. I don't think Aston Martin will catch Ferrari or McLaren unless Ferrari and McLaren have like a load of races where they just have double DNFs or something like that. But yeah, Aston Martin looking great at the moment, and great to see after this tough start that he has had to the season and the team had, that in the last two races they've scored 32 points, I think, just in the last two races. And it's great to see that they are bouncing back. And I think going forward, and I think I said at testing or the first race that by Baku, I'd be very surprised if Aston Martin had not got their shit together and weren't, say, getting some good results, especially with Vettel. And you can see now he's doing exactly that. Going forward for the rest of the season, again, look out for Aston Martin. They might be doing this a bit more later in the season. We'll have to see. And for Lance Stroll, of course, very, very scary moment for him. That puncture just onto the entry of the main straight, pit straight, of course, in Baku. Again, a puncture for him. Again, like I said earlier with Verstappen's, Pirelli have said it's debris. I'm not sure it is, but I don't have an educated answer as to why I think it might not be. So I'm going to go with Pirelli at the moment on that. Luckily, Stroll, did not have a puncture through those Porsche curves. The final little chicane, of course, flat out chicane before the main pit straight itself, because that would have been a unbelievable hit against the wall. And also, very lucky, because he kicked up a lot of dust, did Stroll, when he hit the barriers. So lucky that when he hit the barriers, nobody was coming right after him, because if they did, we might have had a very unfortunate accident occur yesterday. So luckily, that did not happen. But yeah, Stroll, just like the puncture and crash in Mugello, I'm sure was shaken up by it. And it is good to see that he's all okay. And it is a shame for Stroll, because if he had not had that puncture, Stroll would have finished in the points. He was going to come out in a points-paying position if he pitted. Or once he pitted, rather. So Stroll was in a great position, just had to keep going on those tyres, keep up the pace, and then pit, and then he would have been in play for probably 8th or 9th in the Grand Prix. But then, of course, what happened. So shame for him. Just needs to improve his qualifying effort, Stroll, which, of course, we've said plenty of times in his career. His race pace is one of the best on the grid at the minute. It's incredible. I mean, if you look at his race pace in Monaco, it was absolutely unbelievable what he did there, going so long on those tyres. He was so quick compared to, you know, the drivers he was racing against, and was able to easily beat them as well once he pitted. So race pace is fine. Race performances is absolutely fine. Just needs to make sure he starts the races a bit higher. AlphaTauri as well, great day for them. Also, a great day for the Constructors' Championship for them as well, because they are now back into 5th position. And they are, I think, a couple points ahead of Aston Martin. We'll have to look later and see what the exact standings are. But 3rd for Pierre Gasly. That is his 3rd podium, I think, in the last 3 seasons for this team, which, of course, previously used to be Toro Rosso. So, again, tremendous performance by Gasly. In qualifying, he was only 0.02 of a second slower than Max Verstappen in the AlphaTauri. Do we need any more evidence that Gasly needs to be in a top car? And honestly, I would say, I mean, I know George Russell, for example, is a very good driver and all of that, and I do want to see Russell get his chance. But if they're not going to go with Russell at Mercedes to replace Valtteri Bottas, I would like to see Pierre Gasly in that seat, because he deserves to be in a Mercedes. He really, really does. His performances in the last couple of seasons are still right up there with your Verstappens, Hamiltons. Well, maybe not quite Lewis Hamilton, but, you know, Verstappens, Leclerc's, Ricciardo's. So Gasly still performing at a very high level as well. Great for Yuki Tsunoda. And here's a great picture for you guys of the celebrations at the Italian team. Great as well for Yuki Tsunoda to get P7, his best result so far in Formula 1. He's now on 8 points for his season. And again, massively contributed to AlphaTauri getting 5th in the Constructors at the moment. And if they are going to finish in the top 5 of the Constructors' Championship, AlphaTauri need Yuki Tsunoda to consistently perform. And he did in Baku. The whole weekend he was consistently in the top 10. They need that as much as possible from him. Paul Ricard, it'll be interesting to see how he does there, because I don't think he's ever raced there before. I think Pierre Gasly will be very strong. Home race, of course, he'll put in an extra special performance for the home fans. Don't know if there's any home fans allowed in the circuit. I know the Austrian Grand Prix, I think they're expecting to have a full crowd at the Austrian Grand Prix on the Sunday. So that's going to be great to see. The first normal looking, I guess you could say, Grand Prix since, the 2019 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But yeah, for Tsunoda, not quite sure how he'll do in France, but Gasly should be right up there again. And AlphaTauri, thankfully, have their first big points scoring performance, I guess you could say, of the season, when they really should have got this back in Bahrain at Imola, where they had a genuinely very, very fast race car. Good to see they've got it now, though. And of course, for the rest of the season, they will be a very strong team. Now for the rest, Alpine, Fernando Alonso finishing in 6th place. What a drive by him. I actually think Alonso is one of the most underrated drivers from the weekend we've just had. Qualifying in 9th, of course, starting the race from 8th, and consistently was up there in the top 10. I don't think ultimately the Alpine was as quick as the AlphaTauri, McLaren or Ferrari cars. But he did, in typical Fernando Alonso fashion, put the car in a position where it really didn't deserve to be, which was in 6th place ahead of an AlphaTauri, a McLaren and a Ferrari. And that result will be big for Alpine later in the season. This was never going to be a great big point scoring race for Alpine. They did struggle earlier on in the race, especially holding off the very quicker cars in a straight line. Again, it wasn't ever going to be a big point scoring race for them. And I think definitely the French Grand Prix, of course, their home Grand Prix, I think Alpine will be stronger there. Don't know if Fernando Alonso will be, very strong. We'll have to see. He's only done one race around Paul Ricard, and in that race, he was driving a very poor car, so it's very hard to say how he'll do. Esteban Ocon as well, hard to say how he will do, because he wasn't exactly in a great car either for that Grand Prix he did in 2018 at Paul Ricard. But for Alpine, I think they'll overall have a car better suited for the Paul Ricard circuit, rather than Baku. So hopefully, from their point of view, they can get a good, strong points finish there. But I am very pleased to see Fernando Alonso finishing in 6th place and still showing he has plenty left in Formula 1. Hopefully, the car, of course, can improve over time. Alfa Romeo, of course, they got a points finish with Kimi Raikkonen. His first points finish in Formula 1 since the 2020 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola, where, of course, back then he finished in 9th place. And this is only his second points finish in the last 2 seasons so far. So, yeah, Raikkonen, as usual, very good in the race, consistent pace, good pace. Alfa Romeo as well, good race pace. It could have easily been Antonio Giovinazzi up there, finishing in 10th. I will say, Giovinazzi, I think people also underrate his performance, coming from the back of the grid to finish in 11th place. And I thought he did pretty well as well. So, good driving from him. Yeah, Alfa Romeo, capitalising on what happened to Hamilton, Verstappen, Stroll and Ocon. But their pace was good, and they were there to pick up the points when that opportunity came for them. And Williams, of course, ended up 16th and 17th. Even though we had a few retirements, Williams didn't have the pace to get anywhere near Alfa Romeo for a point. So can't really say that it was a disappointing Grand Prix, because simply they just weren't quick enough to get anywhere near a points finish, even though, again, there were a few retirements or cars, say, out of action that shouldn't really be in the positions they were in. So Williams, I think, really did the best they could. Nicholas Latifi, I think, did actually finish the race in 13th place, but because of that red flag infringement, he finished, of course, in 16th, which is a shame, because 13th for Latifi would have been a pretty decent result for him, but that's the way it is. And, of course, Haas F1 got 13th and 14th, which has actually now put them ahead of Williams in the Constructors, because that is a better result, I believe, than what Williams have got so far this season. So somehow, despite having an awful car and one driver who shouldn't even be on the grid, quite frankly, shouldn't be anywhere near a Formula 1 car, somehow they are not even bottom of the Constructors' Championship. That now goes to Williams. And with Haas F1, I'm sure some of you have seen the incident between Schumacher and Mazepin, where Mazepin moved very late on Schumacher. I said this to Nib later in the day yesterday. Just get rid of Mazepin. He shouldn't be on the grid. He's going to really hurt someone one day. And not just hurt someone, he is also, and there's a very high chance of it, he's going to end up destroying someone's Grand Prix one day when getting lapped. It's going to happen. Just please, Haas F1, see the light. He's nowhere near good enough. I know Mazepin's putting money into the team. There's a possibility that Mazepin is going to buy the team, and it's going to be, his team from now on, which would be, I think, the death rattle of the Haas F1 team, because if that happens, then I just think Haas F1 are going to become a complete joke and a team far removed from any real relevancy for basically the rest of eternity, the rest of the time they're in Formula 1. Yeah, Mazepin just needs to go. Nowhere near good enough for Formula 1. Yeah, in F2, showed some decent speed, but for Formula 1, he is shockingly far below the standard required. Anyway, let's now get in finally at the end of the stream to the Drivers and Constructors Championship. So, here is the top 10 of the drivers. Max Verstappen, as I said, leads by 4 points over Lewis Hamilton. Still very close. Then Perez is now into third. Like I said, Perez Only 30, I think, 36 points off the lead, and only 32 points behind Lewis Hamilton. So Hamilton can't afford to have any more trouble or a possible retirement, because if Perez gets another great result, then Perez could easily, very quickly, be in second place in the Drivers' Championship, which after 7 or 8 races would be quite something, to be honest. And Lando Norris is third. Still, Norris performing very well in a McLaren car that is simply nowhere near as quick as that position in the championship. Then Leclerc is 5th, Bottas 6th, Sainz in 7th, Gasly 8th, Vettel 9th, and Daniel Ricciardo in 10th position. Great to see as well Sebastian Vettel in the top 10 of the championship, and I think he will finish in the top 10 of the championship as well. Wouldn't be surprised if he ended up finishing in the top 7, honestly, given how he is performing. And for the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull now lead by 36 points going into the French Grand Prix. So they, unless Mercedes have a 1-2 and Red Bull have a diabolical race in France, Red Bull have a comfortable enough, or comfortable-ish, I guess you would say, lead in the Constructors from Mercedes. And then Ferrari, again, 2 points ahead of McLaren in the battle for 3rd. And AlphaTauri are only 2 points ahead of Aston Martin in the battle for 5th. Alpine are in 7th place, not too far behind and still in play. Alfa Romeo are 8th with 2 points, and they will probably finish then. And again, Haas F1 now above the Williams Racing Team. So there you go, guys. That is the review of the Grand Prix on Sunday. And of course, we now look ahead to the race at Paul Ricard coming again in about 10 days' time. And I think, given I've overrun by about 10 minutes, I'm probably just going to end the stream here. Just want to say, though, again, triple header coming up. So there is plenty of content coming up. Of course, starting in about 10 days' time. I will be live again, and the next video / stream on the channel will be on Thursday, June the 17th. That'll be the preview for the French Grand Prix. And then, of course, we'll be doing a practice, watch-along, qualifying, watch-along, watch-along, and race review for that. And the same for the Styrian and Austrian Grand Prix as well. So there'll be plenty of content in the next month or so. There'll be, in total, 15 streams, I think, in 30-ish days. So, that's one every 2 days on average. So plenty coming your way on the channel. Also, when it comes to recorded videos, I have decided that I am going to work on recorded videos. I have got some ideas in mind, but what I want to do, because we've already got races filling up the time at the moment, I'd rather concentrate on that whilst we're in the thick of the season. When we get to the summer break, and of course there's a 4-week break, probably going to use that 4-week break to then upload that recorded content to keep you guys entertained, and hopefully you guys will enjoy that content. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 videos planned for the summer break, and if they all actually happen, then should be 1 video every week, maybe 2 in a certain week, or maybe 2 for 2 weeks in a row, and then 1 week and 1 another. And then, of course, we'll be back after the summer break for a triple header. So there is recorded videos coming. It's better if I use the next 2 months until the summer break comes to work on those recorded videos so they're ready by the time the summer break starts. So then I can just release them. And again, keeps you guys entertained. And hopefully you guys do enjoy the content. But again, I will be back live on the channel in 10 days' time, Thursday, June the 17th at 7 PM UK time for the preview of the French Grand Prix. And then on the Saturday, should be normal times going live for practice and qualifying. I think, 10:45 AM in the morning for practice 3, and then 1:30 in the afternoon for qualifying. And, of course, the race preview. Oh, that's one thing to say. I have one change I have made to the race weekend schedule is I have moved the race preview now an hour closer to the end of qualifying. So instead of it being 3 hours after the end of qualifying, it's now 2 hours. So qualifying finishes at 3 PM. Normally the race preview will be at 6. Now it will be at 5. And from now on again, the race preview will be 2 hours after the end of qualifying instead of 3, because I just can't be bothered to wait an extra hour to do it when I've already finished setting the stream up that quickly. And then, yeah, of course, race watch along, be 1:30 p.m. on the Sunday, and then a race review again in 2 weeks from now at 7 p.m. So hopefully you guys will join me for that. And if you are new to the channel, then don't forget to subscribe for that content coming up. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or go to my homepage and do it there. And whilst you're there, hit the notifications bell. Don't forget to smash the like button as well, and comment down below what you thought of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and just give, your analysis on what happened, the big talking points and things like that. And as well, smash the like button, share this video / stream and channel everywhere you can. And as well, don't forget to join the Discord server. Nearly 500 people in that server, and quite active it is. And it is the best place, that server, for notifications, my videos and streams. So if you are desperate to be notified as to when I go live or upload, then the best place is that server. But guys, until the preview for the French Grand Prix in 10 days' time, it has been me, Kazza HD. Goodbye.